Bears are not common friends to humans, but what happened here could change your mind about these huge animals. Sometimes bears show up uninvited. If you live close to an area that is their natural habitat, then they may make a surprise appearance, usually just looking for a snack, though they might make an unwelcome guest if they get into your garden or topple your garbage cans. Sometimes people find it difficult to understand each other. Kindness is seen as a sign of weakness, and excessive austerity is perceived as an attempt to humiliate your opponent. How one family rescued a wounded bear, and after some time the parents were shocked to find out how the bear paid them back for his salvation. My wife and I love nature, and often, when we have an opportunity, we choose to go to the countryside and enjoy the fresh air. This weekend my wife, my baby daughter and I went away from the city to the village. We wanted to have a good rest, to go fishing, and catch a trophy fish. The places we were planning to go, I had known since my early childhood. My parents used to have a house there inherited from my grandparents. As time passed, everyone began to move away to the cities, so the village began to devastate, and my parents sold the house. However, the old people remained there, and when you wish to go there you can always spend a couple of days in the house of one of them. We agreed in advance in which house we would go. We took all the necessary things and started our journey. The village was not that close. 2 hours if there's no traffic and the weather was good. I was driving, and my wife and daughter and I were all looking out the window. We drove on a country road and had to drive slowly. It had been raining recently, so the road had been washed out. My daughter fell asleep, and I was ready to start dozing when my husband suddenly stopped and opened my eyes, and I saw that he unfastened his belt and got out of the car. Then I looked at the road covered in mud. An animal was lying on the side of the road. It was so dirty that it was not even clear what color it was. I also unfastened my belt and went out. Having stepped closer, I realized that it was a bear. He seemed to have been recently hit by a car. The country road was so wet, and if you did not care about your car, you could drive fast. But how could you leave an animal dying alone here? Sometimes I cannot understand people's actions. Poor animal. His eyes were opening and closing slowly. His chest was barely moving, but he was still breathing. However, his state was deplorable. My husband and I didn't know what to do and kept standing and looking at the animal. At that moment the car door opened and our daughter was crying, and Maria, take her, sat next to the bear and started patting on his head. We can hardly do anything here, Igor told his wife. Then our daughter looked at him. It was the first time in our life when we saw her with such a serious adult look. She said she wouldn't leave the bear here, and she was certainly not joking. The nearest town was quite far away. We decided to take him to our village and hope that someone would be able to help him there. I took a blanket out of the car, and my husband carefully laid the animal on it, wrapped him up, brought him to the car, and put him in the backseat. My daughter smiled when she said that poor animal could have hope for life. Once again, Igor was amazed by the reaction of his little girl and how the poor animal's suffering felt. Bear's head was behind her, and we set off. If we were able to help the bear, then we could not lose precious time. We drove along the dirty road as fast as the road allowed us. Our daughter was very excited, as we never see the little girl act like that. The bear to wait a bit, as good people would help him soon. But the bear was just lying there and staring into nothingness. It was evident that the animal was very sick once he even vomited on the floor of the car. When we finally reached the village, we stopped at the first house in which we saw people. The light was on and the stove was burning in the house. My husband ran out of the car and knocked on the gate. After some time, we heard the door opening, and an old man came out of the house. He quickly realized what was happening. He was standing and thinking, scratching his head, and then told us to go to the herbalist old woman. She was the only one who could somehow help this situation. She lived on the outskirts of the village. When we arrived at her house, she was sitting on a bench and sorting out some bundles of herbs. Please, can you help us? We were sent to you because the people said that only you could help. I showed her the poor animal, and the woman looked at him and said, bring him to me. She collected her bundles and went to accompany us into the house. The hallway smelled of medicinal herbs, wisps with Ivan tea, calendula, and other unknown medicines were hanging everywhere. She cleaned a small table by the window and pointed at it with her hand. Put it down. My husband laid the animal on the table, and the woman began to examine it. The bear had a broken paw, most likely. His lungs also had some problems, and he had probably a concussion. Because he was so sick. It's good that you brought it to me. You managed to do it on time. Now go away, bring me clean water from a spring nearby, and leave it in the hallway and come to me in a couple of days." Of course, we were surprised that the old woman was so confident in her words, but decided to listen to her. After all, we had no other choice. We took water containers which stood at the house entrance. In general, I got the impression that the woman had been waiting for us. It seemed that she knew that we would be visiting her, sitting on a bench and completely not surprised when we arrived. She had even left a water tank at the entrance. Maybe I'm just making this up. Or maybe people were coming to her so often that she sent people for water by way of a thank you. We went to the spring. It was not easy to find it, as it was close to the bushes. We didn't think about what we would do if the bear recovered, but we hoped for it very much. We took water, left it where the old woman said, and drove off to settle in our house. The whole night we couldn't rest. We were sitting on the veranda and wondering how the bear was doing, if everything was fine with him. 2 days passed. In the morning at 5 o'clock, our daughter woke us up. We explained to her that it was too early to go. She got upset and went to sit outside for a couple of hours. After having breakfast, we went to the herbalist old woman. We arrived at her house, knocked, but she didn't come out. We waited a bit, knocked again, and then decided to come in on our own. The woman was sitting inside and drinking tea. Our bear was lying in a wooden box at the stove. "You came just on time. Come on in. We'll drink tea. I need to tell you something." We agreed and sat at the table, and my daughter went to the box near the stove. The clean bear was lying in the box. His legs and stomach were bandaged. In general, he was looking much better, but it was clear that he was still very weak. Having seen the girl, the bear slightly waved his face slowly. She went up to the bear, greeted him, and sat next to him, gently patting on his head. "Your bear will certainly get better," the old woman said. "But he can no longer live in the wild nature because the wounds are very serious. The bear will be recovering for a long time and won't be able to be a good hunter anymore. You have to decide what to do with it. And by the way, it wasn't a coincidence that the animal was in your way." Igor said to the old woman that my family and this bear are connected somehow. Immediately, it seemed to me not that strange, but there was a feeling that she could predict some things. "Okay, take the bear and leave. I have many things to do," the woman said, pretending to be very busy here. I collected some herbs in a bag and wrote on a piece of paper. "When you need to give them to the animal, be careful and don't mix it up." I took the bag and gave her a bit of money in return. I felt like I needed to give her something. However, the woman did not take the money and said that she didn't need it. "You better bring me water from a spring when you will be in our village again. Stop by and tell me how the bear is doing. If everything is okay with him." Then we left. The bear turned out to be quite an old female. When we went home, he endured the road well, and we began to take care of him. Our daughter went to kindergarten. As soon as she left school, she ran home to her new friend. She started to call her Scylla and he learned to walk on a harness, but sometimes showed aggression. After 1 year, we decided to let her back to Wild Bosom as her nature requires. However, Sala didn't stop to visit us. After 5 years, Maria gave birth to our second child. Andrew was 1 year and Sila didn't show for a while. We thought that she now had her own family too. On this sunny day, something amazing happened to our children. We were busy unpacking when I noticed out of the corner of my eye, an old friend came to make our kids playful, and this time didn't come alone, but with her cubs. Suddenly we heard some cries and my daughter asked for help. We thought that the deserter happened there. Our daughter was on the ground. I ran out to them shouting at the bear so that she would let her go. However, when I ran closer, I saw that everything was fine with baby Andrew and his sister in the backyard.